Grant, O Lord, to trust in you with all our hearts. Amen. I've told this story many times. You could tell it, I'm sure. But it came to mind one last time with the themes of trust throughout all our readings and our hymns as well. It's the story of a man who falls over the edge of a cliff and manages to grab a branch that stops his fall. Hanging in midair, he calls out to God in desperation. Is there anyone up there? Eventually, a voice responds, let go of the branch. The man hangs there in dead silence for a few moments, looking up and then down at the yawning gulf beneath him. Finally, he looks up again and yells, is there anyone else up there? Oh, we laugh at that moment. And we're laughing at ourselves because we have a perfect description of where we stand in this matter of being able to trust God. If we don't like the answer, we ask for another one. In today's collect we prayed, grant us, O Lord, who trust in you with all our hearts. Really? All our hearts? Can we? Yes, there are some great souls who rise to a tremendous level of trust in God. Watch them, try to imitate them, hang with them, stay close to them, lean on them. For most of us, our trust in God is limited. This is not to say in the least bit harshly, but as a realistic and compassionate assessment of human trust. The really extraordinary thing in our lives is the way in which we show trust in everyday affairs. Oh, there are some people who can only be described as having a deep trust in life itself. They trust that somehow, whatever it is, will see them through. Or consider the trust we place in absolute strangers, when we turn on the car, when we flip the switch for a light, when we go to the emergency room, all involving human trust in others whom we have never met. But for those whom we do know, our parents, our grandparents, our godparents, wonderful teachers, siblings, spouses, partners, colleagues, church friends, we trust them through the glue in our lives of faith and love. And we love them because they are part of this community that we trust. And we lean on to them and into them. And indeed, that is correct. The trust is what holds the glue. It's the glue of our relationships that holds us together. And we don't want that glue to become unraveled or unset, kind of fade away, betrayed. When we speak of trusting in God, what do we mean? Perhaps a good way of getting at this is to recall the moment Jesus hung on the cross. At some point in those ghastly hours, someone yelled out, "He trusted in God. Let God deliver him if he will have him." Actually, that hateful and vindictive shout says a great deal about the idea of trust held by the person who yelled it. In his view, the result of trusting in God should be that God keeps us from all harm and failure. Presumably, if that does not happen, then we can stop trusting in God. Obviously, that is not Jesus' view of trust. It is precisely because Jesus trusted totally in God that he opened himself to the possibility of that very suffering. And on what is such incredible trust based? It is based on the belief that if one commits oneself and one's life to God, then whatever happens, and this is the point, whatever happens, it is not a reason for ceasing to trust. Instead, it calls forth an even deeper trust, trust of this kind, the kind of trust we see all through Jesus' life, is the capacity to live life as something that is held in hands other than our own, and to be convinced that these hands will always bear us up and will never betray us. And we may be surprised by seeing trust in those who are not Jesus' closest disciples or colleagues, as we read in today's gospel story about the Syrophoenician woman and the blind man and the deaf man, the man who's deaf. The unnamed Syrophoenician woman steps over Jesus' insult about dogs and cleverly dismantles Jesus' excluding her. She dares to take his metaphor and turn it back on him. She argues that even on his own terms, there should be something from him, some scrap of grace for someone like her who comes to him in faith and trust. She is challenging him. This is a brilliant move on her part, and Jesus backs off. This bold woman trusts Jesus, and she wants to belong to a community of trust and inclusion, Jesus' community. There's a very important pattern we see borne out again and again in the gospel stories of healing throughout Mark's gospel that we've been reading primarily from since last Advent. When the disciples do not trust in God and Jesus, their teacher, they become scared and start sinking. You remember Peter walking to Jesus on the water. Oh, he's pretty full of himself, but he's walking on water until he gets scared and, oh no! And then he starts to sink. Indeed, at the end, all 12 of them lose heart. They all sink as they abandon Jesus at his death. On the other hand, when others, not even Jesus' first 12 disciples, trust in his saving power, amazing transformation occurs, as we have just heard and read in today's gospel. In the case of the deaf man, Jesus urges for people to keep this healing quiet. Now, why would Jesus, the very one who tells them in another part of the Gospels not to hide their light under a bushel, ask them to keep mum about such miracles? Oh, there are many theories amongst biblical scholars as to why Jesus seems so reticent, so humble, so self-effacing, if you will, about why the disciples and others witnessing these miracles are not to tell others. Some scholars have called this theme of don't tell others the messianic secret. One of the reasons I think Jesus is so close-minded about these healings is that he does not want others to misunderstand or abuse his healing power, and more often than not, he wants people to believe and trust in God as part of their healing. In other words, he's not coming to town to provide quick fixes with no personal investment of faith upon the part of the recipient. Trust is critical to faith. It's that glue. And trust, which is part of love, casts out fear. Remember that, Peter. Perfect love casts out fear. And if we are fearful, then we can be pretty sure that we're not trusting in God. Being fearful. At the height of the Great Depression in 1933, almost 25% of the American workforce were unemployed. 25%. Although farmers themselves technically were not unemployed, drastic drops in farm commodity prices resulted in farmers losing their land and homes to foreclosure. I learned all about this from my father, who grew up on a farm during the Great Depression. In the gloomiest of those days of the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke this strange, lovely, and memorable phrase. You know it. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. These were not simply historic words about courage. They were haunting words that generated courage and trust. Hearing them did not merely convey information about being confident in the face of fear. Hearing them evoked that very confidence, created a world where that boldness could be possible. How much more so for us, trusting in God. No matter what. No matter what. Let us always, this and every day, lead, head, move, steer in the direction of our hopes, our trust in God, as the Syrophoenician woman and the deaf man in today's gospel did, as Jesus always did. May these examples from Mark's gospel and our own lives provide inspiration, hope, and fearlessness for our time. Amen.